Welcome to the Orlando Sentinel Editorial Board interview with RaShon Young, one of two Democrats facing off in a June 24th special election for Florida House District 40, the seat being vacated by incumbent LaVon Bracy Davis. She is running on the same date for the Senate seat vacated earlier this year by the death of former Senator Geraldine Thompson. The Democratic primary here for District 40 features two experienced candidates. RaShon Young currently works for Bracy Davis as her legislative aide and is now seeking to replace her. He is up against former state representative Travaris McCurdy. The winner of the Democratic primary will face a Republican and a nonpartisan candidate in September. The seat, based in West Orange County, runs north of Highway 50 from Ocoee to Lake Fairview and includes Pine Hills and Lockhart. Before we get started, one more brief note. In almost every case, the Sentinel has interviewed candidates jointly, but we're trying something new in this race and interviewing the candidates separately. So be sure to watch interviews with the other primary candidates as well. They should be posted soon. To the best of our ability, we will be asking each candidate to answer the same questions in the same time frame. That's because these interviews are not intended to be debates or brawls. Instead, they're a chance for each candidate to talk about what they would hope to accomplish should voters choose them. That's why we ask candidates to refrain from personal attacks and to limit their answers to 1.5 minutes per question. Each candidate will also be given 2 minutes at the end to give a brief closing statement. Joining us today is our opinion editor, Chris Fluker.
Thank you very much for agreeing to meet with us.
And our executive editor, Roger Simmons.
Welcome, and we look forward to talking to you today.
I am Jay Reddick, the Viewpoints editor. As you answer these questions, I know you're aware that District 40 was drawn to heavily favor a Democratic candidate. However, Florida Democrats have steadily lost ground, both in registration numbers and legislative clout. As we talk about specific issues facing the district, please talk about ways you believe that a Democrat could effectively represent this district in a significant way. And now I will throw it to Chris for the first question.
Thank you. House and Senate leaders have settled on a budget agreement that they say will include an elimination of sales tax on commercial leases, multiple permanent sales tax exemptions, debt reduction, and additions to the state reserve and rainy day fund. Do you think that this is a good way to allocate the so-called non-spending portions of the state budget?
Absolutely. I think it is certainly a start. I think we need to take some concerted effort. And first of all, let me thank you all for this opportunity, and for those who are watching. I think that right now what we need to prioritize is providing relief to Floridians. And I think that there are lots of things that the legislature, the majority in the legislature, have prioritized that are kind of passion projects or partnerships that they have with certain people, and it doesn't have an effect or impact for the greater good. Right now, what Floridians are struggling with is an affordability crisis that is crushing them, and we need to be able to provide relief. And it disheartens me when we talk and have conversations about how, there's so much cuts that are happening that we're going to have this surplus of funds, and we're not talking about how do we put money back in people's pockets. And so, while I think that there have been conversations in the places that they are going, I don't have any issues with them. I just think that we need to fix our priorities on how it can have a greater impact on those who call the state home. And that looks like, making sure that we give and put money and invest in these grant programs. And that looks like surplusing or subsidizing, rather, the insurance rate hikes that people are experiencing, and having conversations about what that looks like. And so, to answer your question, yes, I think that those are great projects. I don't downplay them, but I think that there are other things that we should be focusing on.
Well, and as you know, both the Senate President and the House Speaker wanted more tax cuts. If you were forced to choose between additional sales tax cuts and property tax cuts, which would be more fair for the residents of District 40?
I mean, The Senate's tax package was the most rational tax package. It was the one that provided the most relief for low income families, in the expansion of the tax holidays and in cutting sales tax on clothing and shoes under $75 and some of those other things that were allocated in the tax package. I think that the House version of the tax package was kind of a knee-jerk policy that we have seen time and time again in Tallahassee, where they make these decisions about these are really good ideas and these are the things that we're going to do, and then they have to go back the next year and unravel the mess that was made. It is what we're seeing in this property insurance crisis, where we are talking about how, you know, the legislature years ago bailed out the insurance companies and then they left. They took the money and then they left. It speaks to how sometimes there are certain bodies of this process that decide that this is what we're going to do, and they go and do it, and it's not with any rational reason. And so I liked the Senate's version because it provided some clear pathways for doing a feasibility study on what it looks like to get rid of property tax, but also providing relief to low income families. And House District 40 is a district that is made up of the working class, people who, you know, have done all they can to make sure that they provide for their family. And what they are looking for, as I have always said and continue to say, is relief.
Thank you for that. Wanted to switch gears and talk about another form of taxes, tourist development tax dollars. Do you support giving local communities more flexibility in how they spend those? And what do you think are the new streams that should be used to spend TDT?
Yeah, I mean, as someone who worked at the Dr. Phillips Center for the Performing Arts, I understand the impact that TDT has on drawing people to our communities, right? That's why I'm grateful for the expenses that have been made in the space of arts and culture for TDT fundings. With that, I'll say that I do have a broad definition of tourism. I do think that those who have been in this space and who operate in, you know, making sure that we refine our Central Florida community to meet the needs of those who are coming, I think, you know, if that looks like, in their opinion, fixing our roads so that when someone rents a car at the airport and they are driving on the road, they don't get and they hit a pothole, they don't get a flat tire. If that is making sure that we take those steps to mitigate and ensure that people have the best experience when they come to Central Florida, then I think that that's where the money should be spent. But that's just me. Again, I think that those who are in those spaces are taking those things into consideration. That's why we're seeing, you know, conversations happen with, you know, the public-private partnership with expanding the Bright Line out to, you know, Disney and Universal and the Sunrail. Like having those conversations, right? And so I think that, you know, again, I have a very broad definition of what tourism looks like. And I do believe that there are things that that money can go towards to make sure that we meet the needs of our evolving region.
Thank you. And actually, you segued neatly into my next question, which as a legislative aide, you definitely have a lot of experience with, and that is one of the toughest parts of budget negotiations is money for local projects. And, you know, obviously first you have to find a way to get your project into the budget. And then you have to do your best to either hide or deflect the governor from vetoing it. If you are elected, what types of local projects, including specific ones, would you push for this district?
Absolutely. First of all, I am extremely excited about when I get elected, about all the great projects that we will be able to work with. I serve on the board for a health organization called 26 Health, and they prioritize providing health care for underinsured and non-insured patients in different communities. And so for me, making sure that we are able to provide and bridge the gap so that people can have good quality healthcare is something that is extremely important for me and something that I've prioritized and would prioritize. And we worked on some appropriations for them this year, which both have made it into the budget, which we are grateful for. Now, you know, again, I don't want to talk too much about it because I don't want to draw too much attention to it, as you have said, Chris, because we know that this governor is certainly different. I'll just leave it there. But 26 Health would be one of them. There's an organization called Bright Community Trust that prioritizes and helps people who are renters get out of that renting cycle into the home ownership pipeline. And so they provide them with all the services from, credit repair to making sure that they get connected with a lender and get connected to a realtor and get into a home. Also, there's a great organization that functions in Robbinswood Middle School, Evans High School, called the United Foundation of Central Florida. And they have a program called Future Leaders United, and they empower these students. They give them ACT and SAT prep. They give them college prep. They give them, they take them on college tours. And it really is just a mentorship program that takes our children off of the streets. My grandmother would always say, idle hands do the devil's work. And so it makes sure that they can get off the streets and into a program that really is committed to their holistic development. So things like that.
Thank you for that. One issue from the session that did eventually gain agreement between DeSantis and both houses was an aggressive new immigration policy. And I've got two questions about that. First, please give us your assessment of the legislation, first from a public policy or moral standpoint, and then we'll talk about the money after that.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think that we as a state and the state legislature need to be very careful about how we prioritize matters of immigration, because that is not a function of the state legislature. Now, I do think that as a border state, it is important for us to make sure that we prioritize safety, and safety is important. But I think, Jay, we have to be very specific about fulfilling the promise that we've made. We call ourselves the land of the free and the home of the brave. We talk about how we are the world police, and we want to prioritize making sure that everyone lives in safety. And then when those asylum seekers come to our country, trying to attain that American dream that we sell on this greater global market, we tell them that they shouldn't have it. And I think we also need to talk about the racial implications of how this looks from the perspective of what we're doing in this space, and then how it kind of seems, and I don't know what the intent is, but on the face value, it seems like it is targeting a specific group of people. And we have seen that particularly in the state with certain carve-outs for certain communities. We have seen that on the national stage, particularly around this space of, the South Africans, immigrants who are moving to the United States. It seems like, and I can't tell you again what the intent is, but it seems like it is carving out certain groups and prioritizing certain groups over others. And I think that equity is important. And we need to make sure that everyone has the same level stage to be able to have access to gaining citizenship in the United States.
Yes. And as far as the fiscal impact of the immigration plan, local governments now are apparently obligated to house and care for people suspected of being in Florida illegally. There may be court challenges to this plan, but should the plan survive, how can those costs be fairly allocated?
Yeah, I mean, I take issue with it. Let me tell you why I take issue with it, because we have this governor who is telling us that we need to get rid of the lieutenant governor position and create this commissioner on government efficiency when we're spending money in places that Floridians don't care about. And not that they don't care about immigration, but we're criminalizing people who are here just trying to seek a better place in life. And it is harmful and hurtful for how people view this space and where we are. And you can't tell me that you want to decrease or increase government efficiency and decrease and cut costs when you're spending money on harmful immigration policy. That is, again, not a function or a facet of state government. And so, it is antithetical to what they're saying in their messaging when you have them flying migrants out of the state on the taxpayer dollars, when you are running these anti-immigrant campaigns. That's money that can be going, again, back into the pockets of Floridians. And we have to, and I hope that as we go into this next election cycle and even into 2026 and gear up for those elections, that we have those necessary conversations about recentering the priority of the state of Florida in the legislature. and making sure that we hone in on making Florida a world-class destination that people want to call home, but also some place where people feel safe. And safety, again, I'm not saying open the doors for criminals. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if we are going to fulfill this promise that we have made, let's do it in all aspects of it.
Looking at another issue that kind of trickles down from the federal government, there's a lot of anxiety over the role or the lack of role the federal government may play in future emergency management challenges, as well as recovery from major storm damage or other natural disasters. What do you think the legislature should do to be sure that Florida is ready to support its residents during a catastrophic event, should one happen?
I mean, science is telling us that as time goes on, we are going to experience more storms because of global warming. That is something that we know. That is something that the experts in the field are telling us, and we need to take that seriously because Florida, as we all know, is extremely prone to hurricanes in hurricane season, which we are on the cusp of, right? And we need to make sure that we are providing people with the best support to be able to plan in advance for any natural disaster that we expect to experience. And so that looks like making sure that we expand tax cuts to hurricane preparedness equipment and making sure that we have intentional conversations. The Department of Emergency Management does, in my opinion, an all right job on kind of those public service announcements around the space of, this is what you need to prepare for, and these are the things that you need to have, but it's not meeting everyone where they are. And so that needs to be expanded in how the messaging happens. And then if we have the conversation about emergency management and preparedness, we also have to have the conversation about insurance. And it is holding insurance companies accountable so that when people, because it's going to happen, right? If you live in Florida, you are going to experience a hurricane. But what happens is if you experience that hurricane, you need to have the comfort in knowing that when you file your claim with your insurance company, that they're not going to drop you.
Well, that's a great segue into my next question, which is about insurance. With Florida's property insurance market showing little signs of recovery and insurers denying claims, delaying claims, canceling policies, what should the legislature do to make sure that insurance is more reliable and more affordable for Floridians?
Yeah, I mean, back in 2023, when the insurance bailout bills came and hit the floor, Democrats made really strategic amendments to the bill before it was voted on. And they were saying, we don't mind bailing out the insurance companies. We don't mind, providing relief to the insurance companies to make sure that it stabilizes the market. But what they added in those amendments was that you have to hold them accountable. If you take this $4 billion, then you have to stay in Florida for a year or two. And I think that, again, it goes back to those knee-jerk policies where, people may or may not be helping out a friend or two, or, maybe looking out for someone, or maybe getting a kickback, and you have them making these decisions that do not positively impact the people of Florida. And then you have all these people who have gotten dropped from their insurance providers and now they're own citizens, which wasn't created to be able to handle the mass of people who are now on or covered by citizens. And you have them dropping folks, right? And so it is cyclical. It almost seems systemic in ensuring that big business gets the money, but the little guy gets all of the burden. And we have to break that cycle. And I don't think that I'm not anti-business because I own a business, right? I'm just saying that you can be pro-business and be pro-people at the same time. And we have to hold those companies accountable. OIR needs to make sure that they are doing what they need to do to regulate the industry to make sure that Floridians are getting the best coverage that they can.
Thank you. Thank you. Another issue that has become a very big divider is even among Democrats is state-funded education vouchers. What changes, if any, do you support to the state's current policy that offers vouchers to any family that requests them?
I don't have an issue with vouchers. Vouchers aren't going anywhere, rather. Let me say that. The issue that I have is the prioritization of these voucher programs over our public education system. I think you can fund them both and make sure that we provide people with the best quality education system in the country. And if we are going to strengthen our educational system, we can do so by ensuring that we provide funding for our publics and our privates and hold everyone to the same standard, right? But it hurts me, and it is frustrating when you have school districts like Orange County School District who are saying we've had to lay off 800 teachers, and we're going to end up in this next 25-26 academic school year in a $28 million deficit. It hurts. It frustrates me because, again, these are conversations that were had that we knew were going to happen. And the state is talking about cutting all this money from the state budget and how we're going to have this $7 billion surplus. And back when these conversations started happening 2-3 years ago, when the private voucher program was funded at $1 billion, now today we're at $4 billion. And they're not pulling that money from a different pot, they're pulling it from our private schools. And we need to make sure, if we are really committed to the future, I mean, we have these politicians in Tallahassee are talking about prioritizing our youth and making sure that our youth are set up for the success. If we're going to make sure that we do all of those things, then we need to make sure that they have the best quality education. And it does not start at defunding the public school system. We need to make sure that we fully fund, because at the end of the day, the state has a constitutional obligation to our public education system.
And I'm laughing a little because you just actually answered my next question, which is that what more should Florida do to make sure that they maintain that constitutional requirement for free public high quality schools, especially when you talk about teacher pay, which is a big issue for Florida.
Absolutely. I mean, teacher pay, I mean, you had the legislature pass the school start time bill at last legislative session that school districts are saying we don't have enough buses, let alone enough bus drivers. I mean, we have we have people moving in a mass to the state of Florida, and school systems and school districts can't afford to build new schools. I mean, there's a great long list of things. I'm sure if you sit down with the superintendent, and the chair of the school board, I mean, they can give you a list of, this is how much we need. But I mean, I think we need to start with the $28 million here in Orange County. And Orange County isn't the only one that's feeling this deficit, that's feeling this hit to the gut. It's all of our school districts. And this is not something that is centralized to one area. And I feel like a lot of the time the legislature makes these decisions that are very targeted and specific to one community, but when it reaches the greater mass of those who call this state home, it doesn't have that same impact. It impacts them negatively. And so we have to make sure that we are having those intentional conversations about, giving our teachers quality pay so that they don't have to work 3 jobs to afford one roof, so that they don't have to, have all these multiple streams of income and stretching themselves thin, so that they don't have to pay out of their own pockets to ensure that their students have the resources and the supplies that they need in their classrooms. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And I'm just asking for rational, prudent people to make good decisions about what makes sense. Like, I'm not asking for anything that's out of the box. And I think that there aren't enough people at the table having those conversations. And that's why I'm excited about the opportunity to serve the people of House District 40 to be that voice for them.
Switching to another topic, 6 years ago, many Floridians believed the safety and health of the state's water supply was one of the top issues. Today, water quality seems to draw little attention, yet most sources agree that little has improved in the past 6 years. What specific steps would you push the legislature to consider when it comes to the health of Florida's rivers, lakes, marshes, and other surface water, along with the underground aquifer that supports most of the state's drinking water?
Absolutely. I went on a tour of the Wekiva Springs, and we talked about, Florida being on the largest water table in the country and, the impact of that. We've also had a interesting and important conversation about water rights, right? And how, you have all of these utility companies and all of these people who have bought all these water rights. And I know that this is probably going to sound weird to most people who are listening, but when we went on the tour, they told us that they have sold more water than they have. And I don't know how you do that. I don't know. I mean, but apparently we don't have enough water to meet the need for what we have sold. And that is a reality because, I think about, to the point that you made, Roger, about, 6 years ago and how water quality was extremely important. I think about this bill that they just passed, getting rid of fluoride in water. And I think about the conversation that I had with my dentist that he's going to have to do more fillings and deal with more cavities now because of the lack of nutrients that people unconsciously get from, the water that they receive. And I think we have to get out of this place where we are operating in conspiracy theory, right? Where we let these theories drive the policies that we are making. And we need to get behind those who are experts in the field who are telling us this is what we need and this is what should be done. And let me tell you, no expert in water quality or in dental was saying, let's get rid of fluoride, right? And so I think we need to make sure that we are prioritizing the health and safety of everyone in the state of Florida and those who are constituents by making sure that we're having those conversations with the experts.
Thank you for that. While we're talking about health, I wanted to switch over to talk about health insurance. Florida has one of the highest rates of uninsured residents in the country. What more can the legislature realistically do to ensure that state residents have access to affordable, accessible health care?
I mean, this is my bread and butter. Again, I told you that I serve on the board of 26 Health, who prioritizes underinsured and non-insured patients, right? But I mean, let's start with expanding Medicaid. And this is the thing that I think drives me nuts, is that we have all of this money that is coming down from the federal level for Medicaid and Medicare, and we are leaving it on the table. And don't tell me that you prioritize the health and safety of those who call this state home and then turn away the money that is going to be able to give them the health care that they need. And we have a Department of Health. I don't know if you've ever been to a Department of Health, but we have a Department of Health that is not quality health care. And so, one of the bills that I want to work on once elected to the legislature is something that creates a pipeline from our major institutions, our Orlando Health and Advent Health, to these federally qualified health centers and community clinics, so that those nonprofits, those 501c3s that are mission driven, are connected to our large institutions so that people can get quality healthcare. And I think that is us chiseling away at this greater boulder of healthcare access and equity, particularly in communities of color, because I feel like right now there's this thing where your zip code determines the quality of the healthcare that you get. And that's not fair to those who live in those already underserved areas. And so investing more in our FQHCs, they were in the budget. They got good money last year, and I know that they came back around this year to expand on what they are getting. But giving funding for our community health centers and our 26 healths and our nonprofits who are mission based, who want to prioritize care for people.
Thank you very much. We have so many other things we could talk about. Unfortunately, we did promise that we'd get you done in a little less time than we actually got you done. But I did want to, before we go to your closing statement, I wanted to remind the people watching this that the Orlando Sentinel plans to make an endorsement in this race, but we believe that District 40 voters are best served if they do their own research. Look for each candidate's websites, look at their social media, absolutely follow our excellent news coverage. But we do want to remind you also that our endorsement decisions are made by the editorial board alone, Roger, Jay, and myself. And we do not take input from or consult with the newsroom in making those, that they are completely separate from our operation. But each of these candidates in the primary will be able to reach out to you. So take a good look, decide which one of them best represents your values as a voter in this district. And most importantly, remember that whether you vote by mail or at early voting sites, which are already proceeding, or at the polls on the 24th, this is your decision to make. And with that, we'd like to invite Mr. Young to make his closing statement.
Certainly, and thank you to the editorial board for this opportunity to be able to talk to the voters and to talk to you all about the work that I want to do. For the last 3 years, I have served as the Chief of Staff for Representative Lavon Bracy Davis, and we have had our finger on the pulse of the possible for what can happen in House District 40. We have done some really good work, but there's a whole lot more to do. And I am excited, and I believe that I'm the best candidate for this race because I live in House District 40. I am entertained in House District 40, and I have worked for House District 40. And so there is no one who is more committed in this race, in both the primary and the general, to House District 40 than RaShon Young. 4 years ago, when I started this work and started working for this district, I had my eyes set on the prize of one day serving the people of this district in the same office in a different capacity. And so that time is now. And so I have a passion and a heart for the people. I have done life with the people who call this district home. I have helped them in their highs and lows, and I've sat at their dining room tables. I've been to the funerals of their families, and I'm excited about continuing to be able to do that work. So, to those who are watching on June 24th, when you go to the ballot box, I ask that you consider voting for RaShon Young. I say there is no Young without you. And that is true, because this is a work that happens not in a silo, not alone, but when we all come together to the table. And so I have a compassion for what we have built here. And my campaign is built on plans, not promises. And so I hope that you strongly consider voting for me as you go to the ballot box in just a couple of days, whether through early voting or on election day, because a vote for RaShon Young is a vote for real change and progressive progress in this state. Thank you.